I'd come back from India as a hippie in the early 70s, actually 69, about 1970. And funnily enough, I was attempting to write a book then, based on the experiences I'd had with the hallucinogenic drugs in India. It was called Ahead of His Time, Self-Realized States Through the Use of Lysergic Acid in India. So at that time, the devotees had just had a big hit in the charts with the record of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And so I thought what a great idea it would be to have a chapter featuring an interview with the devotees to get their angle on the absolute truth, as it were. So when I finally find out the location of the temple, I went along there and I met Kulashekar Prabhu, who was an early disciple. And I made known my intentions, and he said, well, our spiritual master is upstairs. Why don't you talk to him? I said, great, why not? So then we went upstairs. Prabhupada's room was on the first floor in Berry Place. And so before we just entered the room, he said to me, because he told me Prabhupada, he's a great personality and we offer respects and what have you, so if you do a little pranams and what have you, as you go in, out of respect. I said, sure, fair enough. And having been in India, I'd seen all the sadhu babas and what have you, doing dandavats and what have you. So anyway, on entering the room, Prabhupada was sitting on the other side of the room with his back to the window behind a low desk on a cushion, as we came to know, that's how he would sit. And he was writing something, and he peered over at me. He had his glasses down his nose, and he said, Hare Krishna. And somehow I just felt so overwhelmed to be in his presence that I just automatically fell to the floor like a stick, as I'd seen devotees do in the temple just downstairs. And then I just simply lay there and froze, and I was thinking, well, what do I do now? When do I get up? And so a few moments passed, and then Kulashekar kind of nudged me and said, okay, you can get up now, So then, so I'd had all these preconceived questions I was going to ask, because at that time, you must understand that LSD was my god. I'd interviewed, prior to that, an associate of Timothy Leary, so I was very much into, glorifying the use of LSD for achieving self-realization. So when I sat there and I was facing Srila Prabhupada directly, I went blank. I was just, as I say, overwhelmed. I was speechless. Somehow or other, I'd just gotten a book called The Nectar of Devotion. And I remember reading in that how the pure devotee's eyes were anointed with the pulp of love, the salve of... and looking at Prabhupada's eyes, I could see this. And I could see he was like unlike anyone I'd ever seen in my life. And as I say, I was speechless. So after we had exchanged pleasantries, some moments passed, and then Prabhupada began talking, saying how unfortunate it was that the youth of today were trying to become self-realized through the use of hallucinogenic drugs. And I was just totally taken aback. I couldn't believe it, because this is exactly what I was going to challenge Prabhupada on. So I was just blown away at that point, and all my thoughts of writing a book went out the window. So then after that, kind of Prabhupada broke the ice a bit by talking and saying something that went straight, I could see that. He could see actually what I was thinking. So then I plucked up some courage and I began to ask a question. And I think the first question I asked of Prabhupada was, what are the characteristics of a pure devotee? And Prabhupada expounded for about 20 minutes just on that question alone. And I can't remember too much more about the interview. I think I was with Prabhupada for about a full hour, and there was Kulashekar was the only other devotee in the room at the time. But I remember Prabhupada's closing statement, and he looked at me straight in the eyes and he said, man is the architecture of his own fortune. So you make your fortune now. Whatever is done is done. Now start a new chapter in your life, and in the next life go back home, back to Godhead. And those words are still ringing in my ears to this day.
He said, so you know what the four principles are? And I explained yes. And you're chanting minimum 16 rounds, and I said yes. So on that premise, he accepted me. And then when he gave me my name, he said, your name from now on is Dhananjaya Das. He said, this is the name for Arjuna. He said, Dhananjaya means conqueror of wealth. He said, you will have no difficulty in acquiring wealth. He said, actually there's so much wealth, and he put his hands up in there and he said, there's so much wealth everywhere. He said, money is flying in all directions. He said, we simply have to learn the art of catching it. That's what he told me.
And another time we were doing initiations, and at the initiations, Prabhupada was very grave. You know, when he was chanting on the beads, he was chanting on all these beads, and he was very, very grave. And I remember I was sitting just below the Vyasa-san. I was thinking, Prabhupada's so grave, you know. And yet then when one boy came up, Prabhupada was holding up the beads like that. And so Prabhupada said to him, he said, so what are the four regulated principles? So the boy said, no intoxication, no gambling, no meeting, no illicit sex. And then Prabhupada said, so which one you like the best? And the boy went bright red, you know. He went completely red. And I just thought that was really funny, because Prabhupada had been so grave. It was so serious an occasion, and yet he kind of completely talked like that.
He asked me what the four principles were, and he said, do you vow to chant 16 rounds a day? And I remember saying, yes, Prabhu. I didn't address Prabhupada as Prabhupada. With all sincerity, I said, yes, Prabhu. Prabhupada's, yes, good. I think Prabhupada so past the lack of etiquette. You could see perhaps a little sincerity there. I was being very serious when I said it. Looking back, he should have chastised me very seriously, but he wasn't.